All right, we're gonna get started in like 1 minute. So if you need to grab water, cookies, fruit, and then we'll get started. We know what the mindset with thinkers. Is there anyone online?
Nobody's online, but it does appear that the mic is working.
Okay. I heard someone say book club. I'm doing one tonight too, so that's why. Yeah, it's a busy night. I flew in this morning I went to the game yesterday, and then flew in, and then I got book club tonight too. So. Busy stuff. Trailer?
What do you guys read?
Just for Two, I think it's called. Kind of like an alternate timeline, but there's a couple of us starting to go on, so they got an option to be varied and we ran into each other. Not what I was choosing. That's the nice thing about book club. You get to choose different things.
One Grandview and
Ready? I'll kick off. Jake, we making plans to get together. Well, yeah. I don't know how it normally is on the morning.
And then the
Yeah, that's great. Look forward to it.
Alrighty, we're gonna get started because we have some, we have a Zoom going and we did record. So if anyone wants to look at this later, I'm standing up because it feels weird for me to sit down and speak all the time during the day. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Brian Lewis, current mayor of Olivet, and so nice to meet all of you who I haven't met before. Kate as well, Mayor Pro Tem, is right there. So please, good to see you both. Just want to thank everyone for coming because to me, one of the best things about being in city council and whatnot is getting to talk to people in the community, people I live with, hearing people's ideas. Because to me, the city council, obviously is for the people. So we need to understand what the people want, what makes sense, and then take that and apply that to our city to make our city great and continue making it better and better and better. And I also want to appreciate, we obviously switched this. It was coffee with the mayor. One of the first things when I came in is I'm like, I was never able to make coffee with the mayor. At 9 a.m., I'm always at work. So our thought was, hey, let's try to alternate it. Let's try something different. Now, so we're trying something different. I'm glad the attendance. Thank you for being here. And part of it might be, you're welcome to. It's part of the meeting. Sorry, that's okay. And so, I think this is good. We're going to switch it. We're going to alternate. We're going to do chat with the mayor, coffee with the mayor, chat with the mayor, coffee with the mayor, and then we'll see how that works. And if it, get feedback from people. So please tell us if this time works. Again, it was like, does 5 work? No, 7 works. Too late. It's 4, too early. So we're trying something new. And then today's topic is actually kind of unique, where we're talking about NID, right? So we will, if we have questions that aren't related to NID, we'll probably say, I'll write it down. We'll talk about it later. I'm happy to meet afterwards when we're closed if you want as well. But we're going to try to focus most of the conversation today around the NID because it is a very big topic. A lot of different facts around it, a lot of different emotions around it. So I think it's good. And it's worth noting this is something that council is debating and discussing now as do we want to, pursue this. So our city manager, Jennifer, is going to walk through a little bit of history, a little bit of facts, what does it mean, what does it not? And then after that, we're going to go ahead and do kind of a Q&A and let people bring up questions. Some people posted some online. So after we're done with questions, I'll read those too to make sure those are accounted for as well. But again, big thank you for coming. Let's, ask questions. We don't have the answers. I will gladly say I don't have the answer. We'll try to find it out to you. And that's to me an okay example. So no, please find it. Grab a cookie, please grab some fruit because otherwise you're all taking it home. Please, and get up if you need to and grab it, let's make sure to use it. So, all right, with that, I'll kick it off to Jennifer and let her give a little bit of background. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bear with me for a moment.
Oh, I don't like that. Okay.
Hang on.
While she's getting that up, does this time usually work for people? 5, is that good, or is it? There's no good time, right? But better than 6, better than 7. Yes. All right.
Okay. almost. Tech gremlins are not cooperating today. Because I would really like to be able to share the screen.
We don't get any help.
It won't. Okay. So okay. Me, just have to tell the tech rather than knock it off. Okay, as Mayor Lewis said, my name is Jennifer Yackley. I am the current city manager, and the council is discussing whether or not to implement an Olivet neighborhood improvement district. So I have a relatively brief presentation to just kind of explain what is a NID, a little bit of the history, because Olivet has used them in the past, and then the highlights of what the policy that the council is talking about right now. So it's not going to get into a lot of the technical details, but it should give you enough for an understanding. And then the policy is online, and at the very end, there is a QR code where you are welcome to read the draft policy as often as you would like, and certainly reach out to anybody at City Hall or on council with any questions or comments that you have. So just briefly, what is a NID, right? It's called a Neighborhood Improvement District, and it is a specifically determined area that the property owners within that area have decided to come together and make an improvement. Most commonly, streets. And then those property owners will pay for this. The city pays for it up front, and then the property owners pay for that or either over time, or they can make a lump sum payment. But in short, that's what a NID is. It is this specifically drawn area where the property owners within that area have decided to come together and do this public improvement project. So the city of Olivet has used NID 3 times. Most recently in 2014, North Price. So Price Road north of Olive. They used this to the property owners within the industrial park came together, and the city improved the streets, and those property owners continue to pay that bill off. And the city used limited government bonds in order to finance that. In 2010, they did the same thing for Dameron Industrial. Those property owners came together, asked council to create a NID for that area. And again, those property owners are still paying that off through the bond that the city issued. And then the one that probably many of you are familiar with is the one in 1996, where the city decided that they were going to do a citywide NID, and any subdivision could opt in. And there was a very specific time period that subdivisions had to get organized and get everybody on the street to agree, and then submit that information to the city. And then there was a citywide vote. And then the city did that construction project. It's my understanding it was like a phased construction project. And those property owners paid the city back. And the bond issue finally paid off in 2012, right? So those are the 3 instances of NID that the city has used in the past. So this policy is slightly different. The first main difference is that it would establish a policy that would be ongoing, right? So if council chooses to enact this policy, and your subdivision is not ready, your streets are fine, or you don't want to put sidewalks in, or you're just not ready to do anything, that's okay, right? It's gonna be a policy that would continue throughout time, and if in 5, 7, 10 years, your subdivision says, you know what? We'd like to take advantage of that NID, then you would follow the policy, follow the process outlined in the policy, and you could petition the city for a NID. So it is not going to be we're giving everybody a deadline. You have to get yourself organized and you have to put in by this particular deadline. That's not what it is. It's gonna be a policy, much like the sewer lateral policy, right? Sewer lateral policy applies all the time, okay? And hopefully your sewer lateral never breaks, but if it does, you reach out to the city and we help you through that process, as outlined in the policy, and get your sewer lateral repaired. So this would be a policy that's existing. It would exist moving forward, and when your area is ready, you could petition the council for it. The other difference is that under the policy under consideration, the streets would not automatically become public. It was believed prior that if you used a NID, then those streets automatically had to become public. And there is a Missouri Supreme Court case, Attorney General's ruling, that says that's not true, right? Because normally you cannot use public dollars for private benefit, right? They did say though that NID can be used for private streets. Those streets can remain private. You would not be able to gate them, right? And I don't think we have any gates in the city, right? So long as the street remains open, not gated, then private streets can use the NID and can stay private. And so that is what is under consideration in this policy, is that just because you use NID, you happen to be private streets, your streets are not automatically going to be converted to public streets. So what are the steps to create a NID? And again, this is going to be somewhat high level. You're welcome to read the draft, and it will have every single thing that you need on the petition that's not important for this evening. So first and foremost, we would ask for a pre-application meeting, right, with staff. Because this does require a lot of work for subdivision, we want to make sure that, you fully understand the process, and that your project is going to be applicable, and we just want to work with you. So we would ask for a pre-application meeting. And then because there is some expense that has to be outlaid before the petition is reviewed and approved by council, we are asking for a $5,000 non-refundable fee. And what that pays for is the preliminary cost estimate done by one of our on-call engineers, right? So that engineer is going to look at the street, look at the plan, look at your request, and then come up with a preliminary cost estimate. And that cost estimate is very important because your neighbors, your property owners, deserve to know about how much this project is really going to cost, right? Including not just engineering, but construction management, bidding, staff time, all the things, so that you guys can make an informed decision. Yes, sir.
And that comes after the pre-application meeting, correct?
Yes. Yes.
You're saying you don't need the $5,000 to do the first meeting?
You do not. You do not. No, because the pre-application meeting is, hey, we're interested in this. Can you tell us more? And staff says, absolutely. And we sit down and we'll walk you through it. And then you take it back to your subdivisions and you talk to your neighbors, and then you guys decide, we're willing, we're not willing, we have more questions, whatever. But once you're ready, then, we know you've given us this $5,000, and we know we can call the engineer. and get started.
You want questions now, or should we just hold them for later?
I can do them now if they're what we were talking about.
Yes,
Yes,
5,000 to me seems like a lot of money. For example, if we want to seal the street, it's gonna cost us $10,000 to seal the street.
mhm.
How would this, a small subdivision, how would we want to spend an additional $5,000 in this program?
Can you
Should
wait?
that be a tiered number based on how much work is being put into it? If there's a legal work and engineering work based on the size of the job rather than a flat fee?
Can you wait for like step number 4?
That's why I asked you that question first.
Right, but I will answer your question. Right after I finish number 3. Yes. So number 3, we kind of already touched on. We're gonna use an on-call engineering firm. This is not something that staff, either has capacity to do, to create really good preliminary, estimates, or the actual engineering. So we are gonna use MoDOT's on-call engineering firm. These folks do this all the time, right? So you will be using a professional. And that leads to number 4, which is NIDS would be limited to something that is a significant improvement. So that goes back to why we would want to know and have a pre-application meeting with you. Because if you're coming in with a $10,000 overlay, street overlay, this might not be the best program for you to use. And we want to talk to you about that beforehand and before you go through all of the work necessary for a NID. Did I answer your question?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of.
I wish we'd modify the program a little bit.
Well, I think that's part of the feedback that council is looking for.
Yeah, keep in mind, everything we're talking about tonight is getting the feedback. I'm taking notes, everyone's taking notes, because this is a policy that's put up for discussion right now. The council's looking at this. If there's still changes we want to make to it, we can make changes to it. We could decide to vote for it or not vote for it based off all of the feedback. That's what we're here for tonight. Nothing's set in stone.
Right, they've gotten a draft, right? They've chewed on it enough to have a draft to give to the public for your feedback. That's
But
part of
like
it.
I took your note down about tier. It doesn't make sense to have tiers. So
Do you have something else?
Yeah, but I don't know if you want to hold it. Unless you're gonna get into it. How is the city gonna provide the funds?
Oh, that's
And
on the
previous-
slide.
That's another slide?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
how did I get this one?
I see, you're just thinking ahead.
you got it.
All right, so, significant improvements. So, not a single pothole, not 1 or 2 concrete slabs. So does your street need to be completely redone? Do we need to do, the majority of the concrete slabs, on your street? And again, that goes back to why we want to talk to you about, the project and your thoughts at that pre-application meeting. So they're looking at the eligible projects. And I'm not gonna read this whole list, but I've been talking about street improvements. There are a whole host of things of what that could mean: curbs and gutters, sidewalks, drainage. We would be looking at drainage. If we know that your street has drainage issues, and some of that might be solved by the crown of the street, usually a street's kind of higher in the middle and it dips off to the side so the water goes to the gutters. Those are things that we would incorporate into any NID project that comes forward. And then the other one would be stormwater improvements. And we would need to get authorization from MSD because we work under MSD's permit for their stormwater infrastructure. But we're looking at large projects, right? Significant projects. And then continuing the steps. If your subdivision says, yes, we want to do this, you put the $5,000, given that to the city, we have engaged the on-call engineer. They have been crafting the estimate. Then it becomes submitting the petition. And the petition needs to be signed by the owners of at least 75% of the land area within the proposed district. Right, and that is gonna be different for every NID, right? And we would help you kind of craft how many property owners that really is. I can tell you, if two people, are owners on a property, you only get one signature. So if there is a disagreement in your household, we're not going to.
Not marriage counselors,
We're not counselors on that. If you own multiple people on the property, you get one signature, right? So if somebody owns 5 pieces of property, they don't get to sign 5 times and have it count 5 times, okay? So it is a significant amount of property owners in land area in the NID district, because we want to know, the council wants to know that this is in fact something that the subdivision supports. And it's not something that just 1 or 2 property owners are putting forward. Because even if you don't sign the petition, even if you are opposed to it, you still have to pay your fair share. Okay, so you don't get to opt out. So the council feels strongly that they want to make sure that this is something that the group agrees to.
And if I'm correct, by Missouri law for NID, I think it requires 66%.
Yeah.
We as council thought, let's make it 75, just to, because again, to that point, this threw me at first too, when I was, it's like, so if you get 80% of the people who agree, 20% who don't agree, and council approves it, which is, she'll get, Jennifer will talk to you in a second, then all 100% are on the hook to help pay it back. So.
This may be coming up later, I don't know, but, so let's say, okay, so you figure out what it's gonna cost and they're gonna go forward with it. Is then the city gonna bill each person
We'll cover that,
in the neighborhood?
On the list.
Good question.
Yeah, nope, that's an excellent question.
I'll come by your house.
All right. So, the assessment method. So what happens is, it's actually your subdivision that gets to decide how the bill gets to be divvied up, right? So you could choose to divvy it up the same way that you pay subdivision dues. You could choose that everybody's paying an equal share. It could be by frontage. You get to decide that. And so long as the council, as they are reviewing your petition, believes that that is a reasonable assessment, and it's not, we're making these 11 people pay 95% of the bill, even though they only have 10% of the property in the area. Yeah, this is something that as a subdivision, you all have figured out and said, this is how we want to do it, okay?
And for what is the NID law calls for like a 15-year maximum, I think, under bonds.
On the bond.
Is there a maximum period or an optimal period you're looking at for review?
No, we'll get to that
Is that the
too.
next number?
Yes. I like, see, we're on the same wavelength. All right, financing. So the city council can choose any one of 3 options. They could use city funds. They could obtain a bank loan, or they could issue general obligation bonds. And general obligation bonds, because there is a lot of work involved with that, we would want a significant project, about $1 million or so, in order to do the general obligation bond, because there is a lot of work involved in that. But those are the 3 options. And then once the project is complete and we know the final price, then it's the residents that reimburse the city, and it becomes part of your property tax, right? It becomes part of an assessment, much like your sewer lateral bill, right? Your sewer lateral bill is an additional charge on your property tax. This comes on your property tax as well. You can also choose to pay a lump sum. So once the project is finished, we know what your assessment method is going to be. We divide it all out. We tell all the property owners, here's your bill. And you can choose to pay upfront or council's looking over a 10-year period to repay back, right? So pay back over 10 years. Yeah,
Interest on that?
yes. Yes,
There is interest on.
there would be interest on, especially if you go for bonds or, we do a bank loan. Yep.
I have another question.
If
One resident or two residents pay upfront and the rest of them paid over time.
Mhm.
What is my question? I forgot now.
If there be interest,
Yeah,
Yeah, if you pay the lump sum, then you're not paying the interest.
Okay.
Right,
so there is nothing.
is that possible that one set of residents could do it up front, lump sum at the beginning and the rest?
Yes.
Pay monthly?
yes, yes, ma'am.
My question also is, let's say your neighbors move, but they're still a part of that, is it associated with the property? Or does the person, when they move, have to pay off the rest of whatever sum they owe for the improvement?
Tied to the land.
And then do you also put a lien on it then if, like, they aren't paying, and does the city take care of that instead of the?
So, tied to the land, so if you move, now that's not to say that your seller isn't gonna say, I'm not paying that, right? So that might become a negotiation in the sale, but it's tied to the land. It becomes part of your, property taxes, right? So if you're not paying your property taxes or you're paying all but that, then that becomes part of the county, enforcement of, okay, you're not paying, right? And that is part of the consideration of the council when they're reviewing a petition is if, and I'm sure this is not true, but if, for example, a subdivision came in and said, we want to do this, and we pull, property tax payment history, and let's say that 80% of the people in this mid area are delinquent on their property taxes, that very well might be a reason for the council to say, we don't think this is appropriate for you, right? I don't think that's the scenario, but I'm trying to be, exaggeration for example. Okay, does that hit all of your questions?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think someone over here, we got, okay. Yes,
This kind of goes way back, but what are the advantages or disadvantages of remaining private versus public? Why would you choose one over the other?
well, you can choose private, means you don't have to bring your street up to city standards, which for a residential street means 40 feet of right of way, and typically 26 feet paved. And I can tell you that there are streets in Olivet that are not, they do not have a pavement width of 26 feet, right? So if that happens to be, your particular street, you come forward and you ask the council to, take this street over. One of the lessons that we have learned by taking over the streets in 1996 is we have some very narrow streets. And it's very hard for the snowplow to get down there. It's very hard for the asphalt, vehicle, I'm sorry, I don't know what is the technical term for, the
Paving.
the paving vehicle to get down there. Police and fire are going to be down your street, right? They will drive on your lawns if they have to get to your house, okay? They will get down your street. The snowplow can't do that, right? And, not intentionally anyway, right? So that, but there are subdivisions that want to be able to have their street. I don't think any of the streets here are cobblestone, but they may be a particular type of, aggregated cement, right? And they like that look. We would want vertical curbs in this width, and so people, would likely potentially lose their front yards. And you can, block off parts of your street, if you want the sawhorses to slow people down, you have some options. A public street is, maintained by the city, but you also then become on the list of all the other streets that also need to be maintained by the city. So it may not get maintained in the time that you would like it to be maintained because it balances against everyone else. So in a very short answer to your question.
And I want to add something that, because I know it'll come up as a topic, as most people have approached already, but the current NID policy that is up just for discussion right now and as a draft does not, as part of it, say, even if you're approved, that any private street becomes public. It's not currently part of that condition of the NID policy. And I know some people have asked questions about it even before and written in. To me, we need to discuss it. We can discuss it this afternoon, but I do want to call out the current NID policy is helping a private street who might need help with funding mechanisms and payback collectively to improve their street on all those different options, and a way of doing it collectively because they couldn't raise, $500,000, $1 million. But it is not the current policy to address the private, which I think is a much bigger conversation that we can have, but just want to call that out. Sure. So
I'll go about it. Okay, so if you have any idea what the interest rate's gonna be, or is that gonna be based on the time?
Standing here today, I do not.
Okay, and could you repeat the 26 foot across the street, I guess you're
Yeah,
saying?
it's 26 feet of pavement width and 40 feet of right of way.
I don't know what that means.
So if you actually were to look at your property, so if you're on a public street, if you actually look at your property survey, your property does not go all the way to the curb. There is an area of right of way, right? And it allows either the city in the future to expand the road or do work in the road without having to get permission and easements from every property owner. So you can have 40 feet of right of way. So the city would have 40 feet from the center of the road, 20 on either side, that it owns, right, and can do work in. And then we don't pay 40 feet, pay 26 feet from the center. So your driving lanes are 13 feet. Right, to be able to accommodate a car. Most cars are 9 feet across, unless you have a really big car, and then you're larger. But most parking spots are 9 feet by like 12 to 15 feet in length. So, 13 feet allows you to drive comfortably down the street and have two-way traffic. And then if somebody's parked on the side of the street, allows for that.
We were both wondering if the 26 feet included your curves.
Nope, it's back to back. From the
And I
back of the curb to the back of the curb.
And you think right away, you think of it as like the grassy area before the sidewalk could still be like the right of way
Yep.
at that point. So that's the extra foot we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay, and then what do you suggest that people want the city to pursue the idea of going back to offering the public?
Let's finish this. Let's talk NID policy, and then absolutely, I'm happy to discuss that. Absolutely.
There's a lady behind.
And then the 40-foot right of way, we have our house setback 40 foot, and that's the standard setback for our houses. And so it would be 20 foot into the yard, and then the other 20 foot of the 40 foot setback of the house from the road would be the private.
It would be, so the center, measured from the center of the street, it's 20 feet.
So then you have the 13 foot, which would
13
be the standard road width, and then
Plus 7,
7 foot,
so it'd
okay,
be 7 feet
into the property that's there.
So it depends on your property, because if your current road is 39 feet, you don't have much more, but if you're a narrow one, and how far back you are.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the public and the private. So the people who own their streets, the private streets, have to pay taxes to improve the public roads, right?
You also pay taxes for police, fire,
Well, yeah, I know
public
that, but
works,
what I'm saying
parks. Your taxes pay for all of those things. City Hall, this building, all the other services that are provided. And so I think what the mayor has said is, this really is about the NID this evening, and he's willing to have a conversation with you afterwards, specifically about your comments regarding any discussion the council may have about allowing that, overall option.
So,
What I was getting at, Lorraine asked about the advantage and disadvantages that the people who own the private street have to pay taxes to improve the rest of the public. And the public doesn't pay for the private. So the private street owners have to pay for their own street as well as taxes to improve the public street. So that's kind of like.
and, and again, let's absolutely have that conversation.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's finish this. I want to focus on kind of what the NID policy is, if there are things we would want to change about the NID, what do people think about the NID policy? And then I'll stay as long as we need to have a separate conversation around private-public conversation. It's a tough one, and I think it's something we should discuss. So.
Other questions?
The NID that was 30 years ago, the original one.
Yep.
This is mainly about the streets, obviously. We were told at the time that all the streets had to be brought up to code to be able to participate. So our private street would have to have the gutter put in, have to be widened, would have to have sidewalks.
For the current policy?
Yes,
So I would say the reason they did that in 1996 is they were gonna take on those streets to be public. If, under this policy, right, this policy currently says the current proposed policy, so
But to answer your question though, I don't think it would not be required then.
at the time we were told that we were a public street that's privately maintained.
okay, I can't speak to what was said in 1996.
But the
Right.
cost of bringing our street up to code was prohibitive.
I honestly, I was not hearing.
So I'm asking, if it's a change policy, then street maintenance is something else.
Correct, maintenance is something else.
And I think just to reiterate to your question, make sure I'm answering, or we are answering it, is like a current private street who isn't up to code, who wants to do a NID because they want to do drainage, they want to do gutter, they want whatever they want to do, but they're not bringing it up to code. It still apply for the NID. If council would review it, could be accepted, still isn't up to code, funding go through, it's still private, but we help with the NID. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
Make sure I-
Especially making the subdivision along.
The subdivision is choosing that they want to improve their subdivision and pay for it with a finance package that helps them pay for it because they wouldn't do it, but it does not move them to public at that point, so.
So my follow-up question to that is, if you participate in a NID and you're not up to code, but you're, is there construction standard that would be required in order to participate in a NID? So for example, if we have right now asphalt overlay over concrete and we've been repairing concrete slabs or filling or whatever, if we would choose to participate with a NID, are we going to have to pay for construction of a concrete slab street
no,
after that?
no, you could continue asphalt overlay over concrete, if that's what you wanted to do. We have some public streets that are concrete slabs under asphalt overlay.
Okay, because we envision, to be specific, that at some point down the road, we pay for it as a subdivision, that has to be scraped, that we can no longer patch and seal.
Yeah, it would
and all
have
that
to, what
be
we would
scraped.
want to do is what's called a mill and overlay, right?
Okay.
Where they scrape it. What we would also want to make sure is that what the concrete is doing under an asphalt overlay is acting as a base,
Right.
a foundation, right? So if that old concrete under the asphalt is no longer a good foundation, then you're talking about doing, like a full depth reconstruction, right? So we would not want to redo asphalt over a base that is not going to last you a long time. But until you get into sort of the field, right, until you actually send the engineer out to look, that's not something that, you know, is necessarily known. It is also possible that you may just have a couple bad spots.
Not today,
Right.
2 weeks ago, they were taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
But
For others, it is possible that you may just have a couple bad spots that need to be repaired, a good foundation, and then you could do an asphalt layer.
And I think what's worth calling out, and we definitely, is like, again, it's, if you're a private street, let's cobblestones, you mentioned that, I don't think we have a cobblestone, but let's say it's not a cobblestone, they wanna keep that. Again, the NID, your private street, we're helping with the funding, if the council approves it under this current draft policy, it stays private, and if you wanna repair your cobblestone, that's not up to code for the city, but that's okay, because you're still private, right? And you're staying private in that situation, so however you wanna maintain your street around that, obviously the city's probably not gonna do anything that's dangerous or hazardous or, you know, crazy,
We're not a
but
good investment.
not a
Yeah.
good investment. but-
We're looking, because the city is using its debt capacity or its funds, right? So
Right.
we're also making an investment, right, into this, public improvement. And so we're gonna wanna make sure
Right.
that it's done well, and, you know, it's gonna last 15 to 20 years, right?
Right.
Properly maintained.
And to speak for some of the council, or at least myself, is so this, obviously, I'm pretty new to the council. Most of the council is new. We've had a change, you know, turnover. And so this hasn't really been a policy before, like an ongoing kind of, and part of it was legal understanding of, we previously had thought private had become public and the city's like, we don't think we can deal with that. That was, as Jennifer mentioned, with the court case, not a factor. So, okay, let's open that back up. And so when this was presented to us, we looked at that as there are many private streets that might want to improve, beautify, whatever the situation is, that don't have the financing, you know, people can't invest in this, or it's how you don't want to get into a legal contract with your neighbors and you own it and good luck, you know, collecting on dues and things like that. So the thought was that the city could be almost, you know, help around this and put this policy so people could improve their private streets. It beautifies all of that, helps those neighbors, it helps that community. Let's help with that funding mechanism, and, you know, sometimes you need almost like a cosigner around that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was the initial goal.
Yeah.
That's how we looked at it, as if this could help people, let's have that dialogue to see if people would be interested, and I'm really excited about the turnout, honestly, about that. So I think
Yeah.
we'll start left to right, sorry.
So we didn't participate in it in 1996, and then 10 years later, we had to, you know, repave our street. And we had asphalt overlaid on concrete, so when we found out how much that was going to cost, we appealed to the city manager at Olivet at the time to see if we could somehow get in the mid. And at the time, what he told us was that the asphalt overlay was not okay, and that we would have to bring our street up to the standards, which was going to be even more expensive than the $110,000 that it cost us to, you know, do exactly what you described. Right. So they came in and took up the asphalt, repaired the great concrete, which they don't make the good concrete from 1955 like they used to. Repaired a few, and then we did asphalt overlay. So you're saying now, under this new program, that we would not have to necessarily possibly dig up the original?
It would depend on what that foundation, the condition of that foundation, the condition of that concrete
Sure.
underneath. If it is still suitable to be used as that foundation of asphalt, probably not. If it is in spots bad, you can fix those spots. If most of it is bad, then you're probably gonna have to take it up. But I can't give you a specific answer without knowing the actual condition of the street.
It's part of the engineering, because it has to be a good investment for a area like one like that.
So that, I get that you would provide the engineering, no doubt. And then is it still up to the street, like which bid they pick, or do you provide them?
Yeah, so what's not listed in here, because it's part of those, you know, lots and lots of details, is because this is using, public money, it has to go through all the same rules of any other public works or street project that the city would do. So it goes out to bid, and which the city would manage that, right? It goes out to bid, and then you would receive the bids and evaluate the bids and select the lowest and best bidder.
So the city decides who's gonna do
The
it.
city would decide in conjunction with, you know, the subdivision, right? We would ask, part of the process is asking for basically, neighborhood representatives, right? Up to 3 neighborhood representatives that we, the city, would work with. You know, they're gonna be our points of contact. And then the expectation is those representatives become the points of contact for their, you know, for their neighbors, so that we're not, having to give the same information to 50 different, property owners. So we're asking for points of contact, and then, you can choose who your points of contact are. They don't have to be, trustees. Pick who you would like. But we're just asking for at least minimum, you know, at least 3 people that we can consistently walk through this process with, because it's not a 3-day process to, you know, to do this, so.
Yes, NID, is this a federal program or state program or county program?
Yeah, neighborhood improvement districts are specifically laid out in the Missouri state statutes, right? And the city is allowed to craft sort of a Olivet specific program. The mayor talked about how under state statute, it's 2/3 of the landowners, right? And the city council has decided or considered that 75% is a better number to make sure that there is buy-in from the neighborhood. So it's written in the state constitution, and the council is considering a more Olivet specific policy.
As far as the threshold as to how big the project has to be, is that state limitation? Was that created by the state? In other words, could that be lower? I mean, $1 million, I thought you said.
No, for government, in order to do a government obligation bond, we would want, you know, a project or multiple projects together that equal close to $1 million, right? Because of the time and energy it takes to do a obligation bond. But that's not to say the city couldn't go get a bank loan for something that's less than that, or use city funds. So there are 3 different options.
So if it was like a $300,000 thing, we could do a bank loan. No.
Okay, so this is a smaller project we could do. Okay.
Correct. And so that's why we're allowing for multiple ways to finance it, depending on what is the best financing mechanism for the project.
I have a question over, oh, I'm sorry.
Right, okay.
It's about the multiple project that you just said.
Right.
Before I lose my train of thought on that.
Sure.
So when you say subdivision, do you mean the entire subdivision? Like I'm over here on Brantford, I heard from my neighbors, or Cynthia, there's a different class. Would we have to do individual projects, or would it actually be encouraged, or if we all wanted to do our streets, is that something we could collaborate on?
Yes.
Or do you encourage class to do it individually?
So I'm using the word subdivision because it is a commonly understood word, right? The NID is an area drawn on the map, irrespective of subdivision class.
Okay.
So could 3, I'll use the word neighborhoods, get together, or 3 different streets in 3 different flats get together? Absolutely, right? But it's still we're gonna draw a line on the map. This is the NID. These are the affected property owners. You have to get
75%.
75% of the folks of land area in this very specific area. Yeah. So I'm using that word because it's commonly understood, and to try not to get into the nuance of, I'm trying to make it easy.
And quick follow-up on that, for the land, like you're calling it the land area, but then we also mentioned, like, landowners, like if you own more property, you don't get more than 1 vote. But would your, like, larger land area give you a greater percentage, I guess? Or you could say, we have 20 property owners, 75% of property owners, regardless of how much land or frontage they have.
No, what it would mean, if you have, let's say you have one property owner that owns, 20%.
Yeah, like an acre versus a quarter acre,
Right.
or whatever.
So what it means is, as we're gonna look at, how many people voted yes, and then add up the land area relative to those yes votes, and see, because we know total land area, you can figure out 75%, and if the yes votes and the land area is greater, equal to or greater, yes. But so that one person their vote doesn't necessarily have more value, you've just added more into the, population.
And back to something that I thought was interesting is the subdivision or NID group can decide then what is the cost allocation out of that. Now, within reason, the council, that doesn't make sense. We really don't like this one neighborhood one, so they get 100% of the bill, well, that's fine. But if like, to that point, if they own 20% and your subdivision fees or your private fees say they also pay 20%, and that's how you allocate out the cost of that, okay, maybe that seems logical, but we have to assess that at the time.
And it's like, it would also impact the corner versus a single lot that has just a little bit of frontage versus a lot of frontage.
Everything's so subjective to what we're talking about and the politics of, I'm sure.
And I guess also as you're drawing those lines, so actually, Grandview is a good example because Grandview, half of our Grandview is part of our subdivision, the other half is part of the city. But the part of the subdivision actually does not pay for improvement because Grandview is covered by the city, but Forsythia is not. And so then we still they're still part of our land area, but would you kind of create a puzzle piece around them? And
Yeah,
say they're
so-
not part of it?
Yes,
Or,
yes,
and then it's, because then the other branches off of Grandview also are private and also probably need similar to Forsythia, but then Grandview doesn't.
yes, so the area that you draw on the map does not have to follow the platted subdivision.
So it can be this continuous kind of, because if we have Grandview and then we have ones that branch off, they all don't, none of them connect. So,
I don't know,
okay,
okay? I'm not saying no, I'm saying I don't know.
that's okay, yeah.
Goes back to the pre-application meeting, right? So that you can bring your ideas to us, and if there's something that we're like, we need to check,
Okay.
right? We would check, we would get back to you before you have gone down this long path or invested money, right? That is it's a great example of why that pre-application meeting is important.
And for that, you could also have a mixture of private and public, and ones that actually want to turn over to public, and ones that want to stay private? Or would you then say you have to have one or the other as a group?
So again, I would just separate the two topics on doing a NID versus the city taking your street. Okay, but if you're just gonna, for the purpose of this evening's discussion, just separate those.
Because the current policy doesn't reference taking anything public. Absolutely willing to have the conversation, not trying to dodge it, but I think that's a good point, because even regardless of the answer on that, whether it's, no, that's not possible, or yes, it is not possible, the NID itself could exist, and they could be separate things, if that makes sense. Because part of what we're trying to understand here is, does the NID policy make sense? Should there be changes like the threshold? Should there be changes like the funding? Should there be changes in how we draft the language? Should this even be, adopted or not? Because right now, there is no NID concept. So if a private street comes up and asks for help, we don't have a mechanism that I know of.
Well,
We'd have to enact a NID at that point, right? I guess if a
somebody-
private street came forward and asked for help, there's no NID rolling policy, so how would
there's
that?
no Olivet specific
Yeah.
NID policy, we'd have to follow what's in state statute.
Yeah.
Okay,
I just say, I'd advocate that you pursue it because we know what the price of everything's costing, and there's gonna be streets that just can't afford it if there's not like some upfront money, get them through the next 10 years.
I appreciate that. That was partially why we looked at it as it seemed. Now, again, the city has to look at it because they have to make sure we have to make sure we're fiscal about it. So if we have 15 NIDs coming out of nowhere, everyone's like, here we go. the city can't, obviously, the debt that they're willing to take on is only so much. And is it a good investment? Like, the 80% of people aren't paying their property taxes. We should really talk to people on the street, but you know, like, that's something we wouldn't want to do. But I thought was, right, there may not even be, streets don't even have the options, and then the streets in disrepair, that's not good for the people there, it's not good for all of that, so that's why we considered it.
Speaking as a trustee that had to go through the repaving of the street and collecting the money, I appreciate that you're doing this because it's not a project. And one other unrelated thing, recently, before I knew about this meeting, I called and asked if I could get a list of trustees' names of other subdivisions, because I had a situation and I wanted to ask other trustees, and that information is available, it was really helpful. There are times when there's weird things that come up and I just want to ask somebody else, like, have you ever had this happen?
So if you've had a trustee change, please reach out to, communications@olivetmiller.com. And, you know, let us know who your trustees are. We do keep a list. We don't sell the list, but and sometimes we need to contact trustees also, right? So it's helpful if you have an updated list. Yes, sir.
Who would be doing the engineering studies?
So MoDOT maintains what is called an on-call engineering list. And so these are engineers who have already been vetted, who already have public pricing. And so we would be using folks off of that list, which means it's much like we're allowed to purchase things that have already been competitively priced out or cooperative purchasing agreements. And so it is the engineering equivalent of a cooperative purchasing agreement. And so we would select engineers off of that list. We already do it. So we're very familiar with who we would like to use or who we would not.
Would the engineers run the specifications in?
Yeah.
And the bidding would be on those specifications?
Yes.
Because I know from experience, you get 3 different companies making bids, they get all kinds of different specifications.
No.
Nobody does the same thing.
Correct. And that's why we want to use the on-call engineering firm, right? And this is how, you know, the city does its own large street projects. We bring on an engineer, they give us an estimate, we budget it, and then that same engineer does a survey, puts together the plans, there's conversations, you know, with staff and them. In this case, it would be, you know, the points of contact with the subdivision and city and this engineer. And then at some point, you know, probably a large meeting with the affected property owners, right? So everybody wants to know how it's going to affect their house and their property and their landscaping. And then they create bid documents, which, you know, I mean, they're pretty significant documents. And then it goes out to bid so that all the contractors are equally aware of what the scope of the project is and, you know, what we're expecting. So, yes, ma'am.
This may be premature based on the policy not being implemented yet, but if we're not ready now, you said this would be an ongoing thing. So it's 10 years from now, right? What is the lead time in order to get from point A to B in order to anticipate when you need to start preparing to be in it? Am I making this my sentence? My question?
Yeah, I would say I can't give you like an X number of months. If I were to, you know, pull something out of the hat, I would say probably you should be having conversations with, you know, the property owners in the affected area, 2 to 3 months, maybe. But you know what I'm saying is, be talking with them, get them on board, then come talk to us, right? And then it could be. So it could be 6 months, right, before you actually get to construction. We're not going to, it doesn't make sense to do construction in the winter,
No.
right? And it doesn't make sense to do I mean, they say the construction season starts in March, but it rains too much. So it really kind of starts end of March, April. So we're looking at, really April through maybe November, depends on how warm it is, right? So construction kind of has a season. So again, it's probably gonna depend on the complexity of the project and,
So 2 years prior to the work.
starting, it,
2 to 3 years.
mm,
I think you could do it
be
sooner,
faster.
you could do
You could
faster.
do it faster.
Okay.
It's just gonna depend on,
And I would argue, yeah, do you have everyone aligned? Are you gonna have to try to convince your people, if it's 50-50 in your neighborhood, well, then you're not even bringing it forward to us, right, at council. And then if council has questions, that can go back, and so.
Yeah, I mean, the status at this point is we're increasing assessment every year to try to build as much reserve as possible.
which is
Yeah.
an
And
excellent
if
idea.
the reserve, which will not be sufficient, there's gonna be a special assessment. I mean, that's what, and we are trying to avoid that special assessment being so big.
A surprise for everyone.
A surprise for everybody. So we're all on board, all 24 homes or whatever on board for that policy. So again, we're not ready.
Right.
We're doing a great job.
Yeah.
This guy's doing a great job
Yeah.
getting the street, repairs, but we will be ready.
Sure.
At some point to either do a large special assessment or a NIP.
Yeah.
So-
And that's, one of the reasons I think council really wants to enact this policy that would be ongoing.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
un-
that's helpful.
unlike the kind of, you get one shot, here's your deadline,
Yeah,
get your people, organized, which is, what they chose to do in 1996, not saying right or wrong, that was their choice.
yeah, no, that's
Okay,
helpful.
I think I might have maybe one slide left, maybe,
And we'll keep talking, don't worry.
and we'll keep talking. Yes, this is the end.
Cookies, we can't.
So if you would like to read the draft policy, there is the QR code. It will take you to it. It's also available on the website. So feel free. It is not written in legalese, so you should be able to read it. You're certainly welcome to submit questions or, comment. Time frame for
Completing the review of this.
that is
Yeah,
up to the council.
so I want to call out, this is the start of a process. Like, this was brought to us, again, kind of a new council. We had so much turnover and it's brought forward as, hey, what do you think about this? In the past, maybe, this council, what do you think? So we looked at it and said, this seems interesting. For exactly what you're talking about is pretty much the exact reason. Like, that is very difficult for 24 homes to fund a major initiative and you don't want to be collecting. Like, I imagine that was fun, and going through that. So this was a way to help. Doesn't mean we could do everything, but hey, should we look at this? So we put this, the city helped put this draft policy together. We reviewed it, we made some changes. This is the start. This is the first meeting where we wanted to say, what do people think? So what I'm going to ask now is specifically around the NID, the current policy. Let's park the private-public topic. What are things that are, you still have questions on, or you would want to change in the draft policy? But tonight's not your only time. So I would recommend you can reach out to me or, Jennifer as well on email. You can come to a city council meeting. Please come to city council meetings. They're wonderful. They're exciting. And there's always hearing from citizens. You have 2 different times in the meeting to talk on any topic. If you don't want to talk on the NID, you want to talk about something else, totally welcome it, because that is the way you get to talk to the council. We're not necessarily going to sit there and debate at that moment, but we'll take it in. We'll say, okay, and then we'll talk to the city manager or the staff about that and what do we need to do. So this is not your only opportunity. You want to go back and you want to talk to people. You want to read this. You can have other questions. We're not voting on this next Tuesday. We're not doing that. We're going to take time. We're going to hear from you. We will, when we decide, if we decide to move forward and vote on this, and that's an if, and it changes, it'll be published online. It'll be on the agenda. There's hearing from citizens. You'll know what's coming. And then, we'll have 2 readings on it. We'd have 2 readings on it. It would be very public and, very, kind of advertised out. And so I don't want you to feel like tonight's your only chance to ask these questions, because you're going to read this and have other questions. So, so maybe now, questions, and you're first, but questions about this policy, things you think we should change about this policy. You like this policy, you don't like this policy, separating the public-private, and we'll address that next.
Would your NID be like a one and done, and I would guess that this would be part of your city council and assessment is, can you have more than one going on same time, like, say next year we need it, and then we have an emergency in four years, which we know would be paid for, but we would approach you again in 4 years. You may still have a little bit payment left on the other. It may not be the entire larger area, but a smaller area that need it. Would you guys also entertain a second mid to an area, or is it a one and done thing, or?
So the policy does not address that, right? So the policy does not say you get to use it one time and that's it.
The only thing I'd say is every time a NID is brought before us, we have to look at all the factors of, is it a good investment? What is the debt ratio for the city right now? Can we take it on? Because, you know, sometimes we're in a good position, sometimes we had to buy a bumper truck and that's not cheap, a fire, you know, engine truck. So like, we've taken on debt. And so, you know, I think it would just have to be at that time decision, if that makes sense.
Just echoing the comment about the $5,000 fee, we have 13 houses on our street. So the difference between a 13th house, collecting that, dividing that among the people versus a much larger subdivision, it makes it a little bit more challenging to persuade people to.
I think we could look, one of the things I wrote down is the tier idea but again, if that pre-meeting, no fee, and if you come to that pre-meeting and say, we are all 13 want to go forward, confident we want to go forward, we want to repave everything top to bottom, you know, the city's going to recognize, well, I'm making this up, a $400,000 investment or, you know, I have no idea what it costs. That's where I think we're like, well, the 5,000 is a start because we need to now engage an engineer and they're going to blow through that cost right away. But to your point, if it's something smaller, is there an opportunity after that meeting? And if it meets the criteria of enough, which is subjective, let us look at that as part of the new policy, but I think that's a fair point to bring up. We can look at that.
Yeah, it might be that, we can look at MoDOC and say that, you know, I can tell it's a big project, it's gonna cost them $5,000 to do it. If they're seeing it's a smaller project, maybe $3,000, whatever.
Possibly, yeah. I think again, this city doesn't have staff. Obviously, that's not the term, like sitting around ready to kind of assess this and work on it. And it takes city manager time, it takes, you know, staff time. So we want to make sure we're not putting the city in a burden where they're working on something that they can't, you know, because everything they're going on. But I think it's a fair thing to look at.
The policy itself, I'm glad the council was looking at that. Because I think at one time, before NID came on back in the mid-90s, 70% of the streets that were not state or county maintained were private. I don't know what percentage is now. It was really decent percent.
I don't know the percentage. I know that we have 24 lane miles of private street, which is
24, 42.
24 that's private.
Yeah, but one of the things, one point, as I said, I think the program is a good program that you're considering. Having been a trustee at a subdivision for over 40 years, getting 75% of the people to agree on anything. Some people will never give an opinion. We found out in the past, when the original lead came up, if somebody's selling a house, it's an automatic no. If it's a landlord and they're renting the house, it's probably going to be an automatic no. Because 75% might not be an obtainable number. And it's important to keep the streets in good condition. Years ago, before they did, there were subdivisions that did maintain the streets. And you can see it in their property values. Their property values in Olivet were going up. And those streets, the property values were staying the same or decreasing. So maintaining the streets is important.
Totally agree.
So, but getting 75% to agree is going to be exceedingly difficult.
Well, yeah, and I guess one of the questions I might ask you back is, to your point, I can understand why a seller might say no or a landlord might say no. On the flip side, you know, to your point, property values go up or a street's attractiveness goes up, or, you know, overall that area goes up when there's a street that's in good condition. So there are incentives for even landlords or others to want to do that. 75% versus 66%, you know, it wasn't, I guess the Missouri statute is 66. So we were thinking 75, partially because, and this is, I'm speaking for me personally, one of the challenges I had is you could get it at 76%, but then that means that 24% are gonna be paying and they might have voted no. So that's I struggle with that sometimes, that you're forced to now take on debt that maybe you didn't want or you weren't willing to, or it could be a burden for you. And so I think that's something to consider. So I think that's why we felt the number should be higher. Is it the right number? I'm hearing you say it should be 66. I think that's a discussion point that we started with 75, but this is the first time we've had this kind of public hearing. So you're saying that's maybe too high. You think 66 would be more appropriate, is what I'm hearing?
60%, which was the state.
Was it? Oh, it's
It's
2/3.
2/3.
2/3. Okay. 2/3. 66.
66.
Was it 66?
Yeah.
I was familiar with the original one very much.
Yeah. So, me personally, I like 75. I do recognize it would probably be hard, but if you're going to not force debt, but if we're going to incur debt on people, I think it should be hard, if that makes sense too. But there isn't a right answer.
One of the things they did prior to when the mid started, Olivet came out and said to all the private streets, we're gonna come through your street and with this engineer to do a subsurface analysis. And they did that on every street at no cost to the streets. Is that something that would be considered again? So the private streets know what they're looking at. If they have to replace the subsurface, that's an extremely expensive project.
Yeah. That's not part of the current policy. I think that kind of would be something just completely separate. But that's not in the current NID, enacting the policy to allow subdivisions or NIDs to come together and just to speak to us and try to come forward with it is specifically just about the policy and the funding mechanism. That wasn't something we were considering at this time. So.
I recall in 1996, I think that we were told that we had to amend our indentures. Does that ring a bell to anybody? That because of each of us, you'd have to amend the indentures to say that the city was now maintaining the street. Does that ring a bell to anybody?
So again, I wasn't here in 1996, but it would make sense because your indentures would likely have said that the street was private and maintained by the subdivision. It could have been an easement and not right of way. And in 1996, if it was the intention of the city to take these streets and make them public, you likely did need to amend your indentures to reflect the actual condition of the street post the NID, that it would be, public. And if your indentures had said you could, I don't know, put sawhorses every 10 feet and speed bumps wherever you wanted them to, that would have needed to be taken out. So it would not have surprised me that they asked for those indentures. No.
You're still a private street. We're not trying to dictate how you do it. The only thing that comes forward is obviously now it's the payment, but I've been part of the whole NID process.
Did I hear financing period of 10 years probably for the NID, or did I?
Yeah, no, 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
Does anyone, not taking the private public out, does anyone have any concerns with the city adopting this policy? And again, adopting policy may mean no streets ever come forward, no subdivisions ever come forward, no NIDs ever get created. And okay, but I'm just curious if people have any, I'm actually asking not because I haven't, I just want to understand if there's other concerns people might have.
I'm just wondering about the capacity, if you thought about a budget line for how many of these you can do, or taking on too many at once, or what that would look like.
Not yet, because again, this is so early on, we haven't had one. I think that's why in the language you'll read in there, the council has pretty broad ability to say yes or no based off many, many factors.
Based on basically the current situation.
The current situation is one of them, on top of, again, we don't like the allocation. We didn't like that. We don't think it's a good investment. We don't, X, Y, and Z. But that's where we would use our finance team who would help us, understand this is, and again, taking on a $200,000 project versus making a $5 million project because people want to put in a monorail or something. I'm making this up. That's a totally different investment. So I do like a monorail.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want a monorail down Olive?
The concept, I think, is worth pursuing. I mean, you've got this point, get feedback from the residents and see where it takes you.
Well, and what I would recommend is go back and talk to, you know, your neighbors, your trustees, if you're not a trustees, or at your trustee meetings, just say, hey, the city's considering this. Questions will come up that you didn't think about tonight, and that's okay. Email me, email Jennifer, email communications, you know.
Yeah, I think communications@oliveatmo.com, it goes to multiple people, and it kind of keeps it all in
That's a good place.
one spot.
You could CC us if you want. And then again, come speak at city council meetings on hearings from citizens. You can come up and talk about this, and you get 3 minutes to kind of go, 6 if you want to talk about at both city and hearing from citizens. And the communications will read too, and so it'll get addressed then. So again, we're not voting on this next week. This is the start. We want to gather feedback. I'm hearing tonight very positive things. I'm excited that your subdivision sounds like you already have 24 people, and you know, it's exciting. But I mean, that's kind of why we thought this would be interesting to look at. Is if it helps your street, you know, it helps your street be beautiful. It helps property values, and otherwise, to your point, it's going to be a special assessment, and that's difficult.
Yeah.
And then you have to play the manager, and you have to collect things, and that's difficult for streets. And it's better for all of that if the streets are beautiful, public or private, at the end of the day. People, you know, it's good things. So before we go to the private, Kate, I was going to see if you have anything to add. And Kate is our mayor pro tem, if you haven't met her.
The only thing I was going to add is just to encourage everyone, if you are not already getting the weekly email announcements from the city, to make sure that you sign up for those, because especially the notices about when we are going to have a public hearing and a reading on the draft policy. You know, if you're not getting the emails from the city, you might miss those announcements. So if you have your phone, the best way to do that is just to Google Stay Informed, Olivet, and that will take you to our website, where you can then sign up either for the weekly email newsletter that gives you an update of what's going on generally speaking, or you can also sign up to receive the city council agendas when they are posted, and that really is, it's a lot of information, I get it, but it's really the most specific way to see what is the city council talking about. So that you're really aware of when this is coming before the council, so that you can continue to voice your thoughts, questions, ideas.
So we got like 5 people. We asked people ahead of time to submit questions and things like that. 3 of them were specifically actually around private public, so we'll talk about that in a second. The other 2 were not as much NID related. One was about potholes on the street, which we have forwarded to, we'll take care of sending that to our public works department. That was on Lisa Drive, so we'll take care of that. And the other one was a question somebody asked about, could there be a stoplight on Dealman north of Olive, between Olive and Page? And that is something that is actually owned by county, St. Louis County, not us. So it's something we would, you know, have to discuss with county, and it's be a much larger topic. But it's not in our control for that. But again, we can have that conversation. But I would encourage that, you know, that person will reach back out and let them know that. So. Okay, so anything else on the current version of the NID before we talk public-private conversation? So my hope would be then on the public-private is that going forward with the policy as is sounds good. We need to have many more conversations, let you ask questions. But to me, enacting this policy is a separate topic than should Olivet look at taking streets private. Because a couple people have raised this, and I can completely empathize with the concept of we're paying the same public work taxes that I am. And I think as Jennifer called out, yes, school taxes, city, police, fire, things like that. But we're talking specifically about road improvement taxes, right? That I pay, you pay, but if I happen to be on public, then it's not there. I think the challenge is, and I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 2 days because it's an interesting conversation. Please take some quick pictures. It's that people, if you live there now, it doesn't mean you were there when the street chose to be private at the beginning, right? I recognize that. Some people might have. You might have been at the start of the street, but you may not have been. You moved in, and when you bought the house, it was private. You may not have known it was private because you may not even know what that meant, or you may have and you chose that was okay. And I think it's similar, like somebody lives in the city and they come here and they choose to send their kids to John Burroughs, but they're still paying for school taxes too. Now it's a choice at the time, similar to making a choice to move into private. Now, why streets became private at the beginning? I can't speak for any street, and half the people here probably weren't part of that, or actually almost all the people here were probably not part of that when the street was made private. It might have been because they wanted a certain architecture, it might have been they didn't want to bring it to code, it might have been, I don't know, they wanted a private street at the time, but I don't know why, 1,000 different reasons. One of the concerns I think that was raised is if streets became public, there's a couple of challenges that come to mind. One is if they're not up to code, that does run into an issue of things like plows or paving or things like that. And it's a risk for the vehicles, risk for your vehicles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, also just even being pragmatic, the current staff and budget allots for so many people on staff who then take care of those roads and take care of the streets. And there's so many things every day they're going out looking at. And to add another 24 miles of streets to look at, increases staff needs, increases vehicle needs, increases budget needs. So is that more funding that we need, and is that a tax or not? I'm making things up, I don't know. But that was the concern. But I think it'd be good to understand kind of people's view on it and what that might look like. Because I guess the challenge I would say too is if you offer to one, you have to offer to everyone. Is it something like in 1996, which is not anything we've entertained or are considering entertaining right now, but I want to hear what people's thoughts are. If that makes it better. So yeah.
I personally think it's the right thing to do because 3/4 of the city gets it and 1/4 doesn't, and they didn't have any option about it, paying more. That it's time to relook at that, but I get that it's probably gonna have to go to the citizen vote because it's probably.
And I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's true.
Taxes and, but if it's spread out amongst everybody, may not be a huge change, but then it seems like then everything's just taken care of by the city and it's getting harder and harder to get people on your street to do the work and just making a decision about your street, because I've been on a committee and it's just like a lot of work. We're getting bids and all this crazy stuff, and it's and so getting, we want it to be reasonable, whereas you guys are used to doing this and and have your people that do their thing all the time, so you don't have all these people trying to learn from scratch how to take care of the street.
Understood. No, and I can understand. I think to your point, it's like the 3/4 or the 1/4. It's, when I bought my house, it's funny because there was a sign on my street that said, my street name, and it said private. It was an old sign. It turns out it wasn't private. They took advantage in 96. When I bought it, I didn't even know what that meant. And later I realized, we're actually public. And the sign was just really old and said private on it and things like that. But I didn't know at the time, but I think it's a tough thing when people are buying. They may not know they're buying into private or public and what that means. I would hope that that there's fees associated with it, but that isn't all. I imagine that's always non-divulged, but that's street by street. Some people maybe want to be part of a private. I don't know if that's true or not, but that'd be an interesting conversation too, is does it require a vote? Does it, because what if 30% of people want to stay private? So.
The interesting thing about a private street is the indentures, like our indentures say there's no fences and it can only be one story. So, keeping in the character of the street. So there's some benefit to having some guideline. On the other hand, nobody wants to mess with the pavement. And, and nobody wants to be a trustee and collect the money and go to the bank and pay the insurance and do all that. The upside to it is that you can say what you want your street to be.
That's an interesting point. I was previously on PCDC, and I think it was just Rico in the back, is like, you're right, when someone would come with we want to build a 2-story house, and it's there, first question is, if it's a private street, is what does your street say about that? And they say yes or they say no, and we have to factor that in, and it's a challenge because the city's like, well, it's up to code for the city, but it doesn't align with that. So it can become a legal matter, because the city's like, it's fine legally to build this 2-story house as long as it's within the code, the requirements, and challenge me if I'm wrong, please, or challenge me if I'm wrong. But we don't usually like to get into. I agree, you're right, because then you can set the character for your street. Fences, speed bumps, lawns, grass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Brian, just an idea. I know in our street, we had to do a patch, and to bring a company out to do a small patch was an exorbitant amount of money. Is there any way the city could help facilitate a process where subdivision trustees or subdivision people can get together And maybe for small projects, say, instead of coming out just in one patch here, we've got 3 streets that can be patched. Give me a price for all 3, and it'll save us money. Could it be something on a website that would allow people to correspond with each other from the different subdivisions for small jobs? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to commit to anything for staff, because that'd be an issue staff, but I wonder if the trustee list of people could be an option where trustees could talk to each other to say, like, does anyone have any street repairs or things like that?
Yeah, but someplace we can publish it, like an online thing, say we want to do a repair, is anybody else doing this type of repair?
Don't want to commit staff to anything like that. Happy to think on it or, talk on it, but, I think it's something maybe the trustees could organize themselves too.
Getting the list, so now I have a list, I didn't even know, it was helpful to get the list, to even know all the areas in Alphabet that are, private streets. That was helpful for me to, yeah, so I have a list.
Yeah, I know, we did a repair that I turned around and Price was next to us was doing a repair. And if we had combined it, it would have saved us both money.
Sure.
And not to suggest, my suggestion is potentially maybe start a distribution list among just the trustees, and you guys could work amongst yourselves on that. It might be beneficial as an option.
We could have, anyone wanted to come to a meeting at a place like this, because I would like to know best practices for maintaining pavement. I mean, I'm out looking at cracks all the time, trying to figure out, how to manage that, so there's the benefit to that.
I've heard he's fixed all the cracks in history, so. What other questions I totally understand and respect and empathize with all these comments, because they make sense, and it's, I think they're fair. I do think when we look at it as kind of stewards of the city, it is a challenge. I think it's something that, Jennifer, Kate, and I can have further conversations on. It's not part of this NID, but I hear you in that it's a want from a lot of people. Don't know obviously how many, no idea what it would take, or if it's even feasible, or what that would involve at all. But something I think we can continue to have conversations about. And I would encourage people to come speak at hearing with citizens or send communication and all that, to keep the conversation going as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hey, I honestly want to thank you. I wasn't sure what to expect tonight, if we'd have 2 people, 20 people, 200 people. This was outstanding. Exceeded my expectations for our first nighttime, at least for a long time. Chat, and hope next one will be a morning one. I think we already have the date on the calendar, and as Kate mentioned, if you subscribe, you'll see it advertised out there. They're really helpful. The best things we get is when we hear from citizens and hear from our people, because we live in the community too, and so I want to hear what people think. We'll never probably make everyone happy, but I think the point is we want to listen, try, and then you understand why we made any decision we made, and be part of the process. Come, reach out to us, so we can help and try to continue to make all of that the great place it is, because it is outstanding. So thank you for taking time out of your day to come here. Commitment out of your family and your time, and big thank you to Jennifer and the staff for setting up and doing the prep work and things like that. So a huge help. So
The next one is October 9th at 9 a.m.
October 9th at 9 a.m. So
Here at 5 Oaks.
Yep. So I'm happy to stick around and chat about anything else if anyone wants. Thank you all very much for coming, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
All right.